Okay, we got this program launching and clearing the screen, allowing us to enter new data, but now we need to modify it so that we can insert that data into the database. Of course, if we're inserting into the database, we're going through the business class. The business class is then going to issue an insert order command. And then the data class, the XSD, is going to do all the heavy lifting and put the stuff into the database. So let's go to the XSD first. Just like everything else we've done, if we're going to talk to the database, we need to have an insert method. If you were watching closely when we created this table adapter, it created an insert method for us. However, from my experience, that insert method really struggles with doubles and decimals and stuff, and so I don't like the default one. So what I'm going to do instead is add, I'm going to recommend you do the same thing, a new query using SQL and define my own insert command. Next, insert order date cut. Notice the order ID is already missing. And there's all my field names. Everything else is there with a bunch of question marks that I'm going to have to fill in when I execute this query. So I can just use that one, but it seems to work a little better than the default one. And I'm going to call this insert order. All I get to do is insert, finish, and now I've got another SQL query sitting in my table adapter. I have not this year gone through and tried what happens when I use the new one, the default insert. 5 years ago, it worked just fine. And then all of a sudden, I think it was Visual Studio 2010 or 12, it stopped functioning. It didn't work quite right. I couldn't get doubles and decimals and things put into the database the way I wanted them to. So I built my own and everything was fine. I have not tried using the default one to see if they've updated Visual Studio to make that work better. I haven't tried it. So I'm just going to go with this one. So now in my business or my data class, I have the opportunity to insert data into the database. So now my business class needs to know how to do that. And in the business class, we're still talking about saving. So here's my save record. When I save the current field values, there could still be a soda null or empty string. I still need a table adapter. It's the same table adapter. Remember, I closed the XSD, but the XSD has the update and the insert in the same table adapter. So I get to share the table adapter. But what I need to do is say, no, don't update, insert. How do I know? If it's a new record. How do I know? I ask the business class. The business class basically asks itself, are we working on a new record? So I use my trusty dusty is new record. If is new record, and notice here I don't prefix it with an order because an order is in a GUI. Here I'm saying me, myself. Am I a new record? If I am a new record, then let's insert, else let's update. Make sense so far? Then in here, instead of a TA update, we do a TA.insert. Order. Notice there's the default one. It looks very similar. Just doesn't seem to work well. So I'm going to go with insert order. And then once again, I now need to put the fields in the right order. I believe they're the same order as they are down here. But just to be safe, I'm going to re-enter them. And the first thing it wants is the order date. Remember, we're using the properties here, capitalized. And then it wants the customer ID. Notice I'm just following what's underneath. Notice the words are turning bold, right? Size, pepperoni, sausage. And so far, it's all the same order as the one down below. I can't guarantee it. Mushrooms. Start a new line. Then we got green peppers. And then we got the number of pies. Why are there two? Oh, that's the underscore. Number of pies. Really? Guess you missed that one, Karen. Where's the capital N? Should be. That would be better. Number of pies, then the coupon. Where'd the soda go? Must be after pi. So, yep. So I should have been paying attention. Comma. And soda. Now I'm out of whack. What did I do wrong? Instead of typing, but again, my point was we can follow underneath, and I'm not doing a very good job. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to copy all of these because I think it's the same order. And just paste them in and see if it's happy. It is. So they happen to be in the same order because if we use those default queries, they always list the fields in the same order. So the only thing that's different is there's no order ID. This will insert a new record. But then what? What ID number did it give it? Order ID number did it give? Don't know. What's the rule? What number did it give it? Pardon me? The next number. Does it ever recycle any? If I delete record number 2, does it recycle it? No. So it's always the next number. Are we going to need that? Yeah. So I need to somehow figure out what that number is. PHP includes a last inserted ID function built into the language. It says the last ID number that I just inserted 60 billionths of a second ago, here's your number, 133, whatever it is. We don't have that here. What do you know about that ID number? How could we find out what that number is? What query could we write to find out what that number is? It's got to be the biggest ID number in the table, right? Got to be. Why does it got to be? Because that's the rules here. You never recycle one. So if I make a new record, it's going to have the biggest ID number of any record in the table. So I could come in here and add a new query to say, go find that number for me. Next. Now here's something new. We are not returning an entire row. We're returning a single value, max. Next. Select count. No. I want the max order ID from orders. Next. What should we call this? How about last ID? You could say last order ID if you wish. Next. And all we get is a select. Finish. So now I have this last ID function. Then I can ask the business class, or I can, now going into the business class, I can ask the data class to give me the maximum ID number that you have for orders because that's got to be the one you just generated. And what should I do with that? Only when I insert. I should put it in here because all the rest of this stuff is already filled in. The only thing I'm missing is my order ID. It's still 0. So I'm going to replace this order ID. And I can't use the property here because it's a read-only property. I'm going to replace this order ID with the number that I just got out of that database. Let's see if I can remember how without looking it up. This could return any type, so I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to just typecast that to an integer, and then it'll be quiet. So what does this say? Hey, you, table adapter. Already got you. It's the same table adapter. This one. Go execute your last ID command, which will generate a number, 113 or whatever. Turn that into an integer, stuff it into the order ID. Let's see how that works. New one. Today's date works. Let's grab Mr. Gall here. And it's got to be a large sausage, 1 pie, good enough for now. This is not going to update the grid yet. We're not that far. But I've got a breakpoint in my save routine. I'm now going to hit button save. Button save is going to call save record in the business class. And here we are. We have inserted that record into the database. This is not executed yet, so I don't have the last ID. I don't think touching it's going to help me. No. So what I'm going to do is a step over this one, step around that command. And now I can touch this and see a number, 425. Does that make sense? I don't know. How many orders are in my database? I honestly don't know whether that's the next one or not. Let's go look. That's been executed. Everything's done. What's going to happen next is it's going to mess up my grid, so I'm going to stop it. Not that it matters. Because save record is done. And so it's going back to the business or the GUI, and then the GUI is going to start messing up my grid here because we haven't changed that code yet. So I'm going to kill my program, and I'm going to go into the database. Remember, this one is the master copy. That's not the one that got changed. It's the one in the bin debug folder. That database should have a new pizza order number 425. Sounds big to me. That's why I'm questioning this. So I go into the orders table. It'll default sort by that. Go to the end. 425. Customer number 137. Is that me? I don't know. I could go look, but I'm pretty sure it's me. Here's the date. There's the sausage. I ordered one and nothing else. Everything else is null. Seems to have worked. And it seems to have grabbed the appropriate ID number, the maximum one. And we saw in the code that that had been transferred to the business class. So now the business class has an exact duplicate of this in memory. We insert it into the database, but it's still in memory. So it seems to have worked. I mentioned a minute ago that it didn't insert it here, did it? That's the master copy of my database. It's get a little disconcerting. You write the code, you insert the data, and then you find an error, so you correct it. And the next time you run your program, that new pizza order for Volker Gall on the 14th of April isn't there anymore. Because every time you run, it copies the master on top of the working copy of the database, every single time. Any changes you make are only temporary. Till the next time you rebuild the program, then it will recopy that. So if I run my program again, there should be a Volker Gall at the top of the grid. Nope. Because I ran it again, it completely rebuilt it, made a new copy of the master copy of the database, and I'm not in there. So we're going to have to add myself again. That gets a little annoying when you're testing your insert code. Could turn it off, but I don't think it's worth it. Okay, so now we need to worry about this. Let's go take a look at my notes before I get too sidetracked here. Added the query, modify save record if, add an if statement to check the status of new record. If it's a new record, then use the insert query. And you could copy the parameters from the update command. That typically works. If it's false, then do the update command. Then write the query for max ID. We did that. Call it last ID. Did that. And this says grab its value. Instead of converting it to an integer, grab its value. Let's see if that works. Grab its value here. Last ID dot value. And let's get rid of the int because my notes say you don't need it. Is that true? No squiggles. So maybe this is nullable. I have to grab its value, and it looks like, yes, it's an integer. Because we did a max function on an integer field, it's returning a nullable integer, so the only thing that was wrong, typecasting it worked, but this is probably a better solution. It's nullable, grab its value. I'm not going to test it. My notes say it must be true. And then put that into the ID field. We did that. So good. I'm actually following my notes. Now we need to modify the GUI so that when it's a new record, we insert into the grid instead of updating the grid. That's really the only problem we have here. Button save. Here's my code that updates the grid. I need to keep that because if it's not a new record, I want to update it, the grid. But if it's a new record, I want to insert a new row. So I'm going to add an if statement above here and say if an order is a new order, is a new record. If it's a new record, then do some stuff. Else update some stuff. Make sense? Because there is no row in the grid for this new record. We got to add it. We're going to add it manually. Now remember one thing. Can I run it? Yeah, I could probably run it. Please. Two errors. What error did that cause? Oh, database isn't open, so let's just try running it again. Sometimes it just needs a nice fresh start. If you leave the access database open, you might not be able to run because it can't copy on top. And that seems to be what's happening here. So let's try another technique. If your access database is open, you will not be able to run because you're going to try to copy the master over the working one. If you have the working one open, it won't be able to overwrite it. In this case, I thought I closed it, so I'm going to back up a level and go to this one. See if that clears it up. So I know there's nothing. Those errors is talking about I can't get into the debug folder and change things. Should be able to. That works. Okay, remember that this grid is a duplicate. It's a mirror image of what's in the database for lookup purposes. It's not connected to the database. We went in the database, said, give me this data. We got the data. We threw it into grid. This is not connected to the database in any way. So if we changed who ordered this pizza and save it, we're saving it to the database, but it doesn't update this grid. We had to write the code to update the grid. When we insert, it will not add it to this grid because it's not tied to the database in any way. So to keep our grid in sync with what's in the database, I think the easiest thing to do would simply be reload the grid. That'd be the easiest. But if I have thousands of records out there, that's not going to be very efficient. So I think the most efficient thing to do is simply insert that new record into the grid. So that's where we're going. Here's my button save. If it's a new record, insert into the grid. How do I do that? Well, my notes say is if is new record is true, then we could simply reload the grid. Now, it's easier to add a new row to the binding set. Another reason to have the binding set. Remember, the first reason is so we can sort. So what we're going to do is add a new row to the binding set. Here's how. I'm just going to copy that. New record. It's just my variable name. New. Is that right? Variable. Yeah, that makes sense. This is a pointer to a data row view add new. Okay, let's see if I can make that happen. Data row view. Where did I come up with this? Google, Stack Overflow, someplace. Trust me, I did not look this up in the Visual Studio help system to say how do I add a new row to a binding source. Here's my binding source dot add row or add new. So this is a method, I can tell because it's got parentheses, that adds a new row to my binding source. And I just have to typecast that into something I can play with. So new rec now points to a new row in the binding source. Picture a blank row in that binding in the data grid now. Anything that happens to the binding source is automatically reflected in the grid. All I should have to do is simply transfer, there we go, the stuff from my form or from the record or wherever into my grid. So the first thing I need is the order ID. The only place the order ID exists is in the business class. So for my new record, square brackets order ID. Now Miguel was asking me earlier, do I have to capitalize stuff right? Looks like order ID is okay. Gonna have to be quotes though, wrong language. Set that equal to whatever's in the order ID. Now I can ask for it. I can't change it, but I can ask for it. This is why we need to keep that property. Okay. Then we also have to enter every single column. Remember, there's 3 in mine. Some of you in your DVD have 2. In your car maintenance, some of you have 4 columns. If you're inserting a brand new row, you got to fill all 4 of those columns manually. So my new record dot customer. Where do I get the customer? From the combo box. Remember, the combo box has the text that has the last name, first name concatenated already. And then I also need to set the order date because I have 3 columns. I have to set them all. Where do I get that? I could get it from the business class. Could say an order dot order date, or I can simply get it from the date picker. I doubt it makes much difference. Is there anything I have to add to the end of that to say I'm done, like end edit? Well, that's already here. So here's the end edit. Then what do? Then we resort the grid. And then we want to make sure that we're selecting the old ID. Whoa, where'd the old ID come from? Right there. So it's already there, so that's not a problem. So this says before you resort it, grab that ID number, call it old ID, and wherever it ends up in that grid, after we sort it, it's still going to select my new record. So we'll test that. This should be okay, but I know of one problem. When I say is new record, what is that really checking? How do we know if it's a new record? Remember? Are you brave enough to tell me? Pardon me? It's not in the button. It's in the business class. I'm asking the business class, are you holding a new record? How do we know how does the business class know if it's holding a new record? Pardon me? Not flags. We changed the order ID to 0. So here what we're asking is, hey you, order and order. Is your order ID 0? What does save record do? Changes the order ID to the 425 or whatever it was that we just added. Uh-oh. And we have to save first, don't we? Well, that's an interesting question. There's an easier way. My first thought, I was just bouncing an idea off my head. What if I move this down? Then I haven't saved it, and there is no an order ID. This doesn't exist yet. Oops. So that's not going to work. So what we have to do is capture the current status before save record changes the order ID. Right? So before we save that, we need to make a new variable here, and it's a Boolean variable called isNew, and its name, and it's equal to an order dot isNew record. So what this says is whatever's in the business class, save it temporarily, just a little working variable, because this is going to mangle it. And then down here I use isNew. It's another one of those that caused me a couple of hours worth of debugging, trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And it was just a side effect of save record. Save record changes my ID number. It's no longer 0, so when I hit this line, it's not new anymore. So the easiest solution is before you save it, remember whether it was new or not. And then if it is new, insert. Yeah, tricky, dangerous. Yep, go. Here we go. Let's try a new one. Nothing's crashing. Got a good date. Now, I want to make sure things sort properly. Let's leave it. Add Vokergall. I don't want to type it. So GAUL. There we go. And a large pizza with sausage and mushrooms. Good enough. Save. What I expect to happen is that Vokergall on April 14th, 15 appears at the top of the list. There's bad data with record number minus, ooh, that's not good. Why is my record number -1? Then it says I saved you. Oh. And notice it's in. Is it? Large sausage mushrooms. Yes, it's in. So what was causing that trouble? Good question. Note errors. Continue below. Okay. Now we need to modify get selection changed. Why would the selection change? Because we inserted that new record. It changes the selection. Okay. Grid select change fires as soon as your code adds a new row to the grid. It's a blank row, and it selects it. That's not good, because there's nothing in that row. Grid selection change fires again when you hit the end edit. Oh, because of all this extra, the new record is not selected into grid. To fix this problem, we implement a form level flag that I call inserting record. Oh my goodness. Form level. Inserting new record. The form needs to know, am I in the process of inserting a new record? And it cannot forget that. The form needs to know that. So, my insert worked, by the way. It did add it to the grid, but it caused side effect errors because the grid select change when it added a new row to the grid was causing all kinds of trouble. This new variable that I'm creating has two purposes. Most of you, before class, Matt's program was having trouble. Lyle and I were trying to debug it. And every time we ran it, we had to run it 4 times, right? It said there's bad data, bad data, bad data, bad data. Why? Because as your form is loading and you're modifying that grid and load grid, every one of those causes a grid selection change. We can bypass a lot of those. So that you only get one error instead of 4. Plus, we need to know, are we inserting a new record here? Because when we add a new row to the grid, we've got to be able to bypass our grid selection changed. And grid selection change and add row are in two different places. One's in save and one's in grid select, so the two need to share. So I'm going to create a private flag, it's a Boolean, called inserting record. Now, according to my notes, in button new, I have to set that to true. Which makes sense. In button cancel, I have to set it back to false. Because the cancel button can also, you'll see without doing anything else, the cancel button will also cancel a new record in addition to canceling changes of an existing one. It says first line, and what it really means is the user authorizes it, then do it as a first line. So here I'm going to say inserting new record equals false. Because if the user says, yes, I want to cancel, I'm canceling my new record. I am no longer inserting a new record. The cancel button displays whatever the last row was, brings that record back. Then, in button save, after the binding position, set it back to false. Okay, it's a good thing I have good notes. Where's my binding position? Right here. Inserting record is now false. Why am I no longer inserting? Because I'm done saving it. And I've rearranged my grid. I'm done. It's no longer a new record. It's an existing record in my database at that point. So that's why I set the flag to false. Then, in grid selection change, surround all the code with, only do this if you're not inserting a new record. Don't try to rebuild that grid. So in grid selection changed, put an if statement around the whole blooming thing. I'm even going to put the variable inside, so I don't even declare the variable if I'm not inserting. If I'm not inserting a record, then do all this stuff, otherwise skip it. If I am inserting a new record, if I'm still in the process of updating my grid, don't do this grid selection change thing. Add a new one. Regal. Large sausage mushrooms. Let's add $1 coupon this time. Save. No errors. Bokergal shows up at the top of the list. Should have a $1 coupon change. Go back. Cool. One more thing I need to test though. What if I insert a record for the, let's make it the 12th of February 2002. So that would be 12/2/12. It should slide in between these, right? When I resort. This one came up at the top. How do I know it didn't just insert it there by default? So let's add a new one again. And I need to change years to 2012, February, and I said I wanted the 12th. Let's pick the last person on the list. Tiger Woods, sounds good. He wants a personal pizza with everything. February 12th. Two things should happen. First of all, Tiger Woods should be inserted in the correct position, which is here between Lopez and Inzer. And second, his record should remain selected, even though he's in the middle of the grid someplace. There's Tiger Woods. How come he's not in the middle? He is. He just got scrolled to the top of the list. He's in the right place. His record is still selected. When I switch and come back, everything is right. And now we're inserting records. Say, cool. Cool. Okay, I think it's cool. Now what? Unit 5, time for the assignment. No, not quite. Which unfortunately means Thursday we have a lecture. Because there's a problem. I got a Volcker Gall to 14, today's date. I'm going to add a new record. Today's date, Volcker Gall. Large pizza with sausages and mushrooms, 1 with $1 coupon. That's already in there, isn't it? Is it going to let me add it? It didn't. Where is he? Oh, he's there. That's not good. How come it didn't recognize it as a duplicate key? Because it's not. It's an auto number field. That's number 427 or something. The first one was 425. Tiger Woods, 426. It's not a duplicate, at least not in the table's mind, because it's got a unique ID number that we assign to it automatically. Welcome to Logical Keys. What we're going to have to write on Thursday is code that says, do we have an order for Volcker on this date already? Those are our logical keys for my pizza program. Volcker, you can't order twice in the same day. I'm sorry. The only reason I do that is because if we start making it real, how do I tell one order from another if he comes back at night and orders the same bloomin' pizza with another $1 coupon? Now, how am I going to tell that that's a different order? Ugh. So we're going to keep it simple for right now. And we're going to say, nope, can't come back. If we already have an order for Volcker on April 14th, we are going to display an error message from the business class that says, I'm sorry, I'm not adding this because it's a duplicate record. It's the business class's job to figure that out. When we do validation, class level validation, we'll check all the fields, everything's cool. Then we will do a duplicate record check. I'm just going to show you where it's going so you can kind of get your head around it maybe. Here's my class pizza order. When I save, the first thing I do is say, are there any invalid fields? Invalid fields currently checks to see if any of the required fields are missing. What we're now going to do is insert a consistency check here. And the only consistency check we have in this program is a duplicate record. So here we are going to check, because it's invalid if it's a duplicate, right? If it's a duplicate, we were going to add that to result. Result is going to return not an empty string. Then everything else just kind of says, no, 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 I'm not doing anything because invalid result says it's bad. But how do we check for duplicate records? Next time.